Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and this evening we're joined by Tom Del Beccaro. He's former chairman of the California Republican Party. He's written a book called The Divided Era, and he's also running for U.S. Senate to take over Barbara Boxer's old seat. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks again. How are you?
So, doing well, but we're here to talk about you. So, what kind of lunatic runs for U.S. Senate in California as a guy with a conservative background?
Well, you know, I've become increasingly frustrated with Republicans and what they're doing, or specifically not doing. We've seen over the years that Republicans aren't putting forth their plans, aren't telling people what they'd like to do, in short, not giving voters a choice. And it's not surprising that their popularity has dwindled as a result. If you don't provide the consumer with an alternative product to the main product, you can expect the main product to remain the main product. And so what I would like to do is offer a vibrant choice on a couple of very specific issues and show Californians that there are alternatives, there are solutions. They're not being provided by that main store, so it's time to go down the street and do some different shopping.
Okay. And so what kind of product offerings are you bringing to the marketplace?
Well, there's two really large issues affecting California, and then, of course, internationally with foreign affairs. The two that affect California relate to water and overall prosperity. The Democrats are not providing solutions to California's water crisis. Not long ago, Jerry Brown came out and basically said you need to give up your front lawn, part of the American dream. And he took the tack that he should blame the California consumer for what is going on. Well, that's not only unfair, it's not much for leadership. I could have understood if he came out and said, look, we're in a tight spot right now. We're going to have to tighten our belts, but we're going to get through this together, and I have a plan moving forward. He didn't say any of that. I think California voters deserve a plan. We're number one in the country in poverty. That is a result of our economic policies. We're the richest state in America when it comes to natural resources, including the Pacific coast that allows us to trade with the world. We should be the richest state in America, not the number one in poverty. So the prosperity issue and the water issue are two of the main issues I'm going to push going forward, including with foreign policy issues.
Okay. And so prosperity is shorthand for?
Well, we are number one in taxes, regulations, and debt. So we need to adjust that. That's one way to put it. I come out for a flat tax. A lot of people don't know that about 150,000 Californians pay half the income tax in this state. It is too lopsided. Part of the reason for that is, yes, we have the highest rates, but also there's not enough people working. Nationally, we have a federal code, an annotated code that's 77,000 plus pages long. That's not about collecting money. That's about collecting political favors.
It absolutely is.
It empowers the IRS. Last I checked, no one's really coming out and being a cheerleader for the IRS. We can diminish the power of the IRS, but more importantly, restore growth to the country with a flat tax, which basically gets people making economic decisions about how to make money, how to expand their businesses, and away from tax decisions. You know, I'm a small business attorney. And part of what I do is mergers and acquisitions. And every single time somebody comes to me and says, well, we want to acquire this business or that business, the first thing I say to them is, well, what did your accountant think of? What's the right tax issue that you should be focused on? Not what's good for business, how can you make money, but what has your accountant said? That's upside down. Our current tax code, which in the basic code is over 1 million words, is not a good way to collect money, and it's killing growth. And it's been getting worse under all administrations for the last 40 years. So we need to turn that around. We can do that with a flat tax. It's no small irony that the Eastern Bloc states that we freed have a flat tax, and we do not. So we can restore growth not only to California but to the country, get more people working. That helps out with our long-term debt problems. California has, from city council to the state level, some say 1.1 trillion in debt. We need to get people back to work so that that can be reduced, restore growth, cut down on poverty, and part of that includes having a water plan for the state as well.
And so, but you were saying, just taking that back, 150,000 people pay the taxes.
Half of the income tax.
Half of the income taxes for the state of California, whose population is
above, what, 35 million?
Yeah, 35 million people. And I'm assuming those people are of means. They might be called rich by some people.
Yeah, top 1%ers by others. But in fact, it's more than that. But it's not a static group. One of the worst things we're engaging in as this country is this class warfare business, and the notion that there is a static group top to bottom. I write about this in my book, The Divided Era. This notion that the rich are doing really well and the poor stay the same. You know, when they talk about the wealth inequality, they measure my income after 28, 29 years now being an attorney with my daughter's income, and she's been working 1 year. I spoke to a JC out in Eastern Contra Costa and asked about 100 kids in that junior college whether they thought that was a fair comparison. Not one person raised their hand. That's a bogus comparison.
Right.
What we need is an economy that grows. Because if you're just getting a job, you want a vibrant economy so that you can move up the ladder. What we have in many respects is a frozen economy where it's hard enough to even get on the ladder, and then you're stuck on the ladder, and that's when politicians say, well, let's raise income through laws.
Such as the minimum wage.
Such as the minimum wage. Instead of having a vibrant economy. You know, in North Dakota, they pay $300 bonuses to start at McDonald's and pay $19 an hour.
Right.
And that's not by law, it's by labor demand. So we need to create labor demand in this country, and you can do that by restoring pro-growth policies, a flat tax, and getting rid of the deductions. Look, I'm not interested in the welfare of the rich. They're going to make their money.
For a time, and some of them will lose lots of it because they gamble big.
Yes, but we shouldn't be subsidizing them in the sense, people use that word, not truly doing that, but why are they getting all the tax deductions? Every complexity in the law helps the rich to the expense of the poor. So let's simplify the system so that everyone has a chance. We collect money, people get back to work.
Right. And also, I mean, once people have a vested interest and they're paying a little something, they tend to get more involved and they start watching and holding government accountable, which is a total side benefit.
Well, right now, too many Americans aren't working and they're not paying into the system. And many people point out the trouble with that, as you just did. I'd at least like to have them have that opportunity to come back into the labor force. Right. And you need a growing dynamic economy. You know, real quick, there are some who will say this is the worst wealth inequality we've ever had in our history. That is just categorically false. Rockefeller had the equivalent in the late 1800s of $650 billion, more than the first 15 that exist today, richest people combined. And if you look at the pennies that were being made by the people that were working back then, that's real distance. But you know, out of that structure of a fledgling economy, there was a lot of economic growth. People got on the ladder and the middle class was created. You must have a dynamic economy. We will not get it with our current tax code, all our regulations on our debt. We need a tax code that fosters economic growth, a pro-growth tax code, and the best way to do that is with a flat tax.
And I look at all of the silly things we do in California, though, that actually increase income inequality as opposed to decrease it, and chase the middle class out into other parts of the country where the taxes are more sane or more equalized.
Or no income. We've lost over 5 million people since the late 90s. To no tax states or low tax states.
Right.
Why are we driving them out? Much better to have a broader base with lower rates and the economic activity that comes from that. You know, Joel Kotkin, the demographer, talks about California becoming a place for public employee unions, the really rich and the really poor.
Right.
That's a bad thing.
Yes.
So let's have a tax code for the nation that collects money, but not favors, and is pro-growth oriented.
Okay. And so that's part of the road to economic recovery here, is making a predictable, fair tax structure. But you were talking about natural resources. Obviously, you touched a little bit on water, but I mean, there is going to come a time that water is going to be more and more volatile for a conversation starter. And we'll be heading toward the days of Mad Max here soon or something, where people are driving around trying to collect gasoline and water. But talk to me about what we can do to fix that from, since you're running for a national office, from a federal direction. How much should the federal government be involved in California's water distribution or not? And what would you do?
So water is an intensely and very complex issue. Brings out intense feelings. Water doesn't fall evenly throughout the state, yet we have a single state, and we ship water from the north down to the south. It's always been a question of how much. Right now, we have very bad water management. Almost half of all the water that we catch or control is for, quote, environmental purposes, or let out into the ocean, whatever that means. If we properly managed our existing water, we wouldn't have the crisis we have today.
Blasphemer.
But the real issue is the future.
Right.
Because we're slightly tightening our belts now. But the people in charge of this country currently, and in Sacramento, have set forth policies. And by all guesstimates, we're going to have another 10 to 15 million, maybe more people come into this state. Now, I may not specialize in higher math, but I'm guessing if they think there's not enough water for the people that are here today, then surely we don't have enough water for the up to 33% of the more people coming. Their water policies are almost exclusively focused on conservation. And surely we must conserve, we must be more efficient, we should recycle more water. As water falls to the ground, we need to catch it. Our system is to flush it down a sewer and out to the ocean. I went to law school in Singapore in '86. Their system is to catch the water, deliver it to reservoirs, recycle it, and use it for many purposes. We need to do that. In that big basket of conservation, there's a ton of stuff that we should do. But there's also two other significant aspects of what we need to do. Today, or recently, we learned again about another major pipe breaking in Southern California in millions of gallons. We had that 94-year-old pipe in UCLA, 20 million gallons. It's an open secret, but needs to be known by more, that up to 10% of all water use in California leaks out of municipal pipes. Recently, California put forth a protocol for the use of future groundwater. We should have a protocol for the replacement of out-of-date pipes that are causing leakage. Think about the number of 10%. It doesn't seem like a lot until you realize consumers only use 15%, so it's 2/3 of that number. But it also means once every 10 years, an entire year's worth of water
is gone.
We should be more efficient than that. And then the real question becomes, how can we increase supplies? Because we must increase supplies over the current amount if more people are going to come. Now keep in mind, there's some on the left who don't want those increased supplies because they don't want us to be here.
Right.
But you know what? People are here and they shouldn't be living in poverty. And this issue cuts across all demographic lines.
Sure.
If you're rich and have a big place, you want to preserve your garden. If you're a 30-year-old Latino agricultural worker still looking for a job, and I've traveled 54 of the 58 counties. I've been into the Central Valley many, many times. Some are turning into ghost towns. Unemployment rates for Latino men in the 50 percentile. Mm-hmm. That's just wrong.
Right.
I walked a precinct in Selma, California. When Jerry Brown made his announcement saying, this notion that you're going to have a green front yard, you got to give that up. Well, they've already given it up. And that was arrogance for him not to even know what they're doing. I walked precincts and dirt in front of the homes. No more yards, no more sprinkler system. We have got to increase supplies. You can do that through greater recycling. You can increase supply per se by fixing the municipal pipe problem, and using better catchment. But we also should now think about importing more water and much more desalination. Mm-hmm. And where do the funds come from that? Well, I'll tell you where they should start. We need water not trains. In my discussions, I ask people to raise your hand if you think we have a train crisis. No one says we have a train crisis. We do have a water crisis. So we should repeal that and focus monies on bringing in more water.
Okay. And so, but in addition to just people need it to drink, to live, and it's not just lawns. Water is the Central Valley for agriculture. It creates jobs.
It's huge for industry. So, but don't limit it to agriculture. As important as that is, the world's breadbasket, all those jobs. I've talked to a lot of farmers, spent part of last weekend in a focus group or discussion group over that. But there are many more industries as well. The entire landscape industry is affected by this. The construction industry.
Right.
Met with someone recently who had a large project of more homes for the Livermore Valley. He's been working on it a number of years. Now that water district is told you have to reduce your water usage by 25%. Well, how does adding 900 homes fit into that equation? It doesn't.
No, but that's the other legislation with things like Plan Bay Area, forcing high-density housing into places that don't even have the current populations to support it.
So it is much more than ag. Ag is getting a bad name in this. They feed us.
Well, no, I'm talking about the jobs in ag, but you're right. The construction field, not to mention fisheries, hospitality, yeah.
So this notion that we're going to conserve our way out of this is just simply false.
Right.
Especially with more people coming. We need new sources, and that includes building pipes from other states and bringing it down into this state so that there's a stable long-term supply. With the money Jerry Brown wants to spend on high-speed rail, over $70 billion, they could build 40 desalination plants.
Right.
Let's get about doing that.
Right. There are dams, there are all sorts of things, and more purple
reservoirs.
Pipes. Yeah.
The site's reservoir in the Sacramento River Valley was approved in 1994. Not one piece of dirt has been turned. The Republicans have made efforts to pass laws, and to get that expedited, the Democrats turn it down. Of course, I'm running for U.S. Senate, so the question is, what role does the federal government play? Jerry Brown, along with President Obama, has the ability to relax certain regulations during a drought. They're not doing that. Why? Because they want to squeeze the consumer. They want to fine them. Well, I'm here to tell you that fining people because of their water use is not a policy. That's the absence of a policy. The policy is how to fix it. The negative reaction that Jerry Brown brings is because he's failed to plan for this moment. And remember, the last major drought we had, he was governor, and he killed water projects back then.
Right.
Here he is again with the wrong emphasis.
And if I'm not mistaken, the federal government is getting involved in things like removing dams in Siskiyou County and that kind of thing, right? Which is the opposite of the direction that we should be going.
And not giving federal water rights allocations to farmers. Let's talk about the California Water Resources Control Board.
Right.
Not water supply board, the control board.
Or management or anything else, control.
The chair of that, Felicia Marcus, says all the time, the easiest, cheapest thing to do is to conserve. She's right. If we all stopped using water, this would go away. But that's not going to happen. People asked her, what about a pipe? Lines from other states. In fact, JFK had an idea for a pipeline from Alaska. And her comment is, well, that's too expensive. To who? To who is it too expensive? Just to give you some context to this. We buy and sell water in what are called acre foots. That means you take an acre of land and you put a foot of water on it, and how much does that cost? Historically, it's somewhere in the 150 range. Desalination plants, like the one being built in northern part of San Diego, which they expect to bring in 10% of their future water supply, is about $3,000 an acre foot. Now, those on the left complained, said that was too expensive. But to who? If the consumer is willing to pay a little bit more for water, what's wrong with that? Just to take this all the way, that bottled water you get, won't name names, but the bottled water you see in the store is $2.3 million an acre foot.
Really?
If the consumer is given a choice, they can be price sensitive. So she says it's too expensive for the pipeline. But to who? What if all of the Central Valley agricultural interests got together and decided, okay, government, we'll build the pipeline. Of course, they'll build it into future prices. But we'll build the pipeline. You help us out with easements from Alaska or from Wyoming where they have too much water, Colorado, all these places where there's more snow. And we'll bring it in, and we'll use that, and we'll exclusively use that.
Just clear the path for us.
Yes. And what would that do? That would make it easier for them and put less of a, sorry to use this word, drain on other water resources.
Oh, he went there.
Around the state. Yeah. Now, what if they decide to come further? Is that too expensive for the Water Resources, quote, Control Board?
If they're only thinking that government has to pick up the bill for everything, yes.
Or control it.
Or control it.
They need to do that. We cannot get in. What we're facing here, if this continues, is a legal civil war over water rights. They're going to try and nationalize the water rights around this state. They're going to hurt areas that have been, like the Palm Springs area, which have done a wonderful water management job over the years. They're going to take away their water and trying to give it to other places who haven't done a good job. And this is going to go on and on. We're going to have lawsuits. People are going to lose more jobs except for in the legal industry. This is the wrong way to go.
Right.
We can bring more water to this state. You just need a practical plan to do it, and I'm going to give that plan.
Okay, and so we just have a couple minutes left. You also mentioned foreign policy. What's wrong with our foreign policy?
Well, you know, for years, there's been the fight between the right and the left on how active you should be. But the one thing, whether you're on the left and prefer to be less active internationally, or libertarian and prefer to be less active, or on the right, regardless how far you go, what you should be clear in is your diagnosis. No one would go to a doctor who refused to give you a diagnosis but started to hand you medicine. Obama's failure to call ISIS what it is a catastrophic mistake. Because what it does is it confuses our enemy. It puts, our allies. It puts doubt in their minds. They don't know where we really stand. If you create doubt in the minds of your allies, they act separate from you. There's less cohesion. It also emboldens your enemies. They think, well, they're afraid to stand up. Or they think, heck, they don't even know what's going on. We got them fooled.
Right.
We should have clarity on that issue and then decide how to deal with it. But until you get to the clarity, until you make the diagnosis, you can't be effective in dealing with it.
Okay, so clarity in foreign policy is one of the things that you're after. We're about to have to wrap up, but tell people how they can find out more about your campaign and where you stand on things.
Del Beccaro for Senate. Nice Irish name there, Del Beccaro. DELBECCARO for Senate, FOR Senate.com. And drop us a line, join this really solution-oriented campaign. Not about pointing fingers, but saying, here, we got a couple of problems. Let's put forth some solutions and bring people to the table on those issues.
And these aren't third-rail issues. These are just things that affect us all.
Well, let me tell you, in my view, the water issue is going to be the Prop 13 of our generation. This is going to cause an uprising like Prop 13 did, and the Democrats, until they start offering solutions, are going to be on the losing end of it.
Well, thanks for sharing. People can find out more on the website, and we'll be right back after a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum.
The Conservative Forum of Silicon Valley began with 20 conservatives meeting at a restaurant in November of 2003. Our mission is to promote the principles of American liberty through education. By 2012, we had grown to over 600 paid members. Our monthly meetings feature well-known and prestigious conservative speakers addressing issues that are critical to our country's very survival. This includes speakers like Victor Davis Hanson, Andrew Breitbart, David Horowitz, and many others. In addition to our monthly meetings, we sponsor a conservative local cable access TV show, The Right Side, covering today's topics. Our Constitution discussion group not only teaches the Constitution, but started our annual essay contest that awards 2 $1,000 scholarships to local high school seniors. We are a virtual clearinghouse for grassroots organizations by providing them with table space at no charge in our exhibit area. There are typically a dozen groups represented. If you are like-minded, join us at our next meeting and become motivated and empowered. Liberty, made in America.
And welcome back to The Right Side. That was a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum. They've made the show possible for the last 3.5 years or so, but what they're really known for is their speaker series. So for example, in May, Alan West will be addressing 300 to 500 conservatives right here about 3 minutes away at the Conservative Forum here in Mountain View. In June, Jim Garrity of the National Review Online. July 14th, it'll be a barbecue, and that will always be a good one because July, the patriotism flowing from 4th of July is something that you'll feel off in the surrounding areas. Geert Wilders, a Dutch politician and advocate of stopping the Islamization of the Netherlands, will be there for what I'm sure will be a very controversial speech on August 11th. And Kurt Schlichter, commentator for Fox News and others, will be there in November. You can find out more at theconservativeforum.com, but typically the show goes on around 7 p.m. the second Tuesday of each month, and again, learn more at theconservativeforum.com. So Tom Del Beccaro joined us this evening, and he was talking about the things that he thinks are important for us to address on a national scale. And who could disagree that things like taxation, water rights, and foreign policy are issues that are going to affect us all. I encourage you to learn more about Tom at delbeccaroforsenate.com and make your own decisions as to whether or not you can get behind his policies, or reach out to him, throw darts, but make your voice heard, because he's the kind of individual who does want to actually hear from the citizens that he hopes to represent. On that note, we appreciate you joining us this evening. I've been your host, Chris Pareja. This has been The Right Side, and we'll look forward to seeing you either on the show or in person sometime soon. But if you just can't wait, reach out to us at therightsidetv@gmail.com, and we'll try to get back to you and answer any questions you might have. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great night.